Anxiety is your brain coming to terms with the fact that it is not in control. If you are not able to control yourself, build back further. Uninstall the app. Install it every day in the morning for 1 hour if you need to do that. You do not have to be perfect. You just have to get better. They don't get caught up in this I am a failure, I should just stop and go away.
If you are always anxious during a job interview or before a date, then you are at the right place. In today's podcast, we'll help you find a practical solution to your significant problems like alcohol and social media addiction, inferiority complex, mental health issues, depression, and many more. Today, our guest is a neuroscience expert and TEDx speaker, Dr. Siddharth Warrior. He received his MD from Seth GS and KEM Hospital in Mumbai and his MRCP UK degree from the University of London. He is one of the popular guests of the Ranveer Show and has done multiple live streams with famous influencers like Tanmay Bhatt, Suhani Shah, Samay Raina, and many more. In this podcast, we'll try to understand your brain's technical aspects so that you can work towards achieving your goals faster. Trust me, this podcast will help you know more about yourself, your habits, your mindset, and much more. So, without getting delayed, let's get started. Hey, Dr. Siddharth. I think we're super excited to have you on Growth Show. We have a lot of questions for you, so let me jump straight into them. So, my first question to you, I think a lot of us have gone through a phase where we are facing a job interview or an exam and we're super anxious about it. So, how do we sort of deal with that, feel less anxious whenever we're preparing for a job interview or an exam?
I like the first question is about anxiety. It's always good to start off with the easy topics.
Right.
And so anxiety is something that every single human being on earth has gone through. There is no problems in feeling empathy about anxiety. Because once you start talking about anxiety, everybody will look back at their own life experiences and they'll remember that, oh, even I went through this.
Right.
That doesn't mean that everybody has anxiety disorder, though. So that's one of the first things that I want to emphasize on because we keep hearing these words of depression and anxiety, and we sometimes get confused about what they mean. So anxiety disorder is very different, and anxiety is different. Anxiety is something that everybody has felt. Everybody who's given an exam or proposed to a girl on Rose Day in college, or whatever, gone up on stage to collect a prize or announce something. Everybody's felt anxious at some point. The neuroscientific basis of anxiety is fascinating for me. Anxiety is your brain coming to terms with the fact that it is not in control. That's the gist of it. If you are not in control, your brain is coming to terms with it because according to the brain, when you're not in control, your survival is under question.
Right.
It's as simple as that. So when you're going for a job interview, your brain thinks that because I can't control the outcome of this interview,
Right.
I might die. So your brain's pretty silly that way. So the way out of it is to just convince your brain that, listen, nobody's coming to kill you and your life is safe. You can just calm down and move on with life.
Fair point. Never really thought about it like that. Okay,
Yeah.
fine. Let's move on to some of the harder questions then. So,
Hmm.
I think addiction to drug, alcohol, tobacco are on the rise, and people frequently fall for it. And when they know it's bad for them, you know it's bad for you, but they still fall for it, and later they develop a severe addiction to it. So, firstly, I want to understand how does it start? Like, how do you sort of go to a phase where you're not in control, you're addicted to something, and beyond that, if someone is addicted to it, how can they get over it?
The basis of addiction is your brain has mistaken that thing for something that is very useful to you,
Mhm.
one, and has historically found it very difficult to get that thing.
Hmm.
So, historically, carbohydrate rich foods has been A, very good, very useful, can keep you alive,
Right.
and B, has been very difficult to find.
Hmm.
So we have somehow not adapted to this new environment where carbohydrate rich foods are everywhere and they are not at all difficult to find. You can just, swipe right on Swiggy and that's it.
Right.
You have a cake in your house, you have, a burger in your house.
Hmm.
So you don't have to hunt anymore. You don't have to go through a forest anymore to find fruits. But our brain hasn't gotten used to this new phenomenon yet.
Hmm.
So we are still living in the jungle. So which is why we have to train our brain into realizing that you don't need to crave these high carbohydrate foods anymore. Similarly for tobacco. So tobacco, the chemicals inside the molecules of tobacco, like nicotine, which is basically going into your brain and stimulating both GABA and dopamine receptors, which tricks your brain into thinking that this is something worth fighting for. And it's like a feel good molecule. It makes you feel like you've achieved something. And even though you have not, you get that sense of achievement. So it's a trick that you play on your own brain. That is the basis of all addiction. So while at the start it might feel good, essentially you're tricking your brain into doing something that can have a harmful effect. I feel awareness is the first step. Once you realize that this is what is going on and that feeling of pleasure isn't really real, you haven't earned that feeling of pleasure, then you realize that the price you have to pay is with your health.
Right.
And that's where recovery starts.
Got it. And is it usually possible for someone to recover from this on their own with the help of, say, I see a peer going through it and they just refuse recovery because for them they have accepted that this is something that's really good for me. So how do I sort of nudge them into, going through recovery, maybe professionally, but I think initially it's for them to go over that barrier, right? Okay, you know what? They're not accepting that this is wrong for me. So how do I sort of deal with that?
Yeah, that's the biggest challenge because I remember I used to work in a de-addiction OPD when I was in my residency. And one of the maxims that the professors used to tell us was that every time an addict comes by themselves to the clinic saying, I need help, the chances of them recovering from addiction are really high.
Right.
But if it was a partner who brings them, the wife or the mother or the father, then the chances are very low. Until and unless that person feels motivated to give up on that habit, or at least accepts that habit is wrong, recovery is difficult. So step one would be to making them aware of why is this a problem. Only then can we reach to step two, which is now what do we do about it?
Right. So awareness, it all comes down to
Awareness. Yeah, it starts with that. Yes.
Fair point. Okay, so now let's talk about another addiction that I think is sort of inherently a part of all our lives, is smartphone addiction. So I'm curious to understand how our brain responds whenever we're, scrolling mindlessly through social media or through YouTube or anything.
Yeah. This is the modern pandemic, right? Every
Right.
single one of us has a phone in our hands. We don't even realize when we lift the phone, open it, and start scrolling.
Right.
Like when I'm having conversations, face-to-face conversations with people, I notice them looking down at their phone. They don't have a notification. There's nothing there. It's just a habit now.
Correct.
Even if there's a 20-second pause in our conversation,
They-
the other person might
Right.
open up and start scrolling for no reason. There's nothing important. It's just a habit now. So that is dangerous. Social media has done some pretty amazing things. It has brought some really wonderful changes in our lives. But this addiction, where the act of scrolling has become part of our basic personalities, it's almost become an instinct.
Right.
That is dangerous because we are essentially being controlled by platforms that get all their money from advertisements. We cannot forget that. For all the good that social media does, we cannot forget that the whole basis of that industry is gaining your eyeballs for the purpose of marketing, for advertisement. So we have to remember that there has to be control. And the best way to do it is to build back. So all the habits that we've built over the last few years, you have to build back. So if you feel that you've been scrolling every day non-stop, then have certain times where you will open up Instagram. If you are not able to control yourself, build back further. Uninstall the app. Install it every day in the morning for 1 hour if you need to do that. It only takes you 5 minutes to install, less than 5 minutes to install. Right? So install it, scroll for an hour, uninstall. No problems. None of your data will be lost. But at least you will stop that instinctive opening up and clicking on the app habit. So sometimes you do need to take radical steps, in order to get yourself out of a habit.
Right. And how, like, I mean, I'm sure you've dealt with people. How bad has social media addiction gotten for people? Like,
Oh,
because
pretty.
when you said
It has been.
uninstall and install, I'm just like, wow, that is insane.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's become such a part of our lives that we can't even comprehend uh, taking a step so drastic,
I know.
you know. And but it's not that drastic. Like if you
Hmm.
think about it, earlier we used to watch television,
Right.
right? And we would watch, say, half an hour, 1 hour, or we would watch a movie, 2 hours movie.
Hmm.
Imagine if somebody were to tell you that you can carry the television around with you all the time.
Hmm.
I mean, that's such a silly idea. Why would I carry the television around with me? So
Right.
when I leave the house, I don't need to watch a movie. I'll come back and watch a movie. When
Correct.
I leave the house, I have other things to do. I want to
Hmm.
talk to my friends. I want to go to work. But that's what we are doing. We are carrying the television around with us in our pocket. So
Right.
it's not that drastic an idea to leave the television at home.
Hmm.
It's fine to do that, you know. So we have to just rethink the way we look at the world, and suddenly drastic solutions might seem very reasonable.
Fair enough, fair enough. I think it happened to me recently. I got hand of my old phone, which is 7 years old, and it was so slow. And I'm just like, you know what? I'm not going to be able to use this. So I just kept it away. And I'm just like, I wish I had this right now because now, as things become smoother, you're just so used to having that around. So I'm just like, I can't believe at one point I was, surviving with that piece. So I get
Yeah,
what you
and
mean.
in those days that was the pinnacle of technology.
I
You
saw,
were so proud of it.
I know. Like, oh, I have a touchscreen phone. Oh, extremely smooth, great camera.
Yeah,
uh,
good times.
yeah. Okay, so next I want to understand with you, like, what are mental models and do they really help us understand the world in a better way?
Yeah, mental models are some things that we all use. Whether we
Hmm.
do it consciously or subconsciously, we all have a system in place where we can look at all the information around us and arrange them in a way that fits with our pre existing beliefs.
Hmm.
That's what mental models are. We are always learning things, we are always getting new information. Mental model is a way of, is your system of how do you break down new information and assimilate it into your existing worldview,
Hmm.
right? So this is extremely useful to know what is your mental model, what are the biases that you have, what biases affect you more, and how can you overcome them. So there are many different mental models that you can look at. There are, I think, there are some 30, 40 of them described.
Hmm.
Usually all of us have some variations of all of them. At
Hmm.
different times we use different biases, we use different ways of looking at the world. It's
Hmm.
extremely useful for everyone to just explore this in their own time. What are your mental models? How do you look at the world? And
Hmm.
if you are making mistakes in thinking, how can you change that? So you sometimes say that you jump to conclusions. That is a mental model at work. The reason you jumped to conclusion was because your mental model equated A is equal to B, while it might not be the case. A might not be equal to
Hmm.
B. But something in your mind had told you that A equal to B, which is why whenever A happens, you'll immediately assume that B will happen. And that is a bias. That's your mental
Right.
model. And you need to change that.
Fair enough. So you said it is amalgamation of a bunch of mental models, like that's how we function.
Yeah.
So, but is there some useful mental model that we can probably that you've come across in your life? Maybe you can explain to us with an anecdote.
Mm, so I'll tell you one mental model that I have kind of developed when it comes to relationships,
Hmm.
which is the conflict theory. And it started off with the relationship, but then I've also realized that it applies to every personal dream and every personal goal as well. In our mind we have multiple thoughts, and sometimes those thoughts clash with others. So if I want to say I want to become a doctor, but I also want to create a a music album, for example. Like
Right.
I want to be a rock star, or I want to become a musician. Now these two thoughts seem to be in conflict with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Now if I don't address this conflict, somewhere down the line, if I keep on behaving like I want to do both of these things, there will be a catastrophe, or there will be a lot of stress on my mental reserve. So the earlier you identify a conflict, the easier it becomes to deal with it. And this is when it's just you. Now, imagine if there's another person. Suppose you're in a relationship with somebody. Now you have to take in your conflict as well as their conflict, and how their conflicts conflict with your conflicts.
Right.
So then it becomes like like a pyramid of conflicts,
Right.
and that's why relationships are so complicated. And if you don't even realize this structure, then you might end up going on fighting about things that are really not what you should be fighting about. You're arguing about, why did you leave the sock on the floor, or why did you choose this curtain color? But that's not really the point. The actual conflict lies somewhere else. So identifying conflicts and resolving them has become my mental model for understanding relationships.
Fair enough. I hope it was that simple.
Like everything else, it's a matter of practice. Trust me,
Right,
it's just a
right.
matter of practice.
Fair enough. Okay. So, what is the first principle of thinking, and how is it different from critical thinking?
Oh, wow. So this is a great question. First principles thinking has recently shot back to popularity because of Elon Musk, because he gave a couple of interviews where he talked about it, and it became like this fascinating thing. But it's actually not new. First principles thinking has always been there among scientists. I think even Aristotle used to write about it. The idea is that any problem should be broken down into its core principle that is proven by physics and mathematics, and all of the assumptions has to be taken out. So the sun rises in the east. So the sun rises is itself an assumption, because it actually doesn't rise. So when you say sun rises in the east, it is an assumption. It's not first principle thinking. First principle thinking is that the earth and the sun, the earth revolves around the sun, and the earth rotates, in this angle and this direction, in this speed.
Right.
And the fact that we say the sun rises in the east is an assumption, because what is east? East is an arbitrary direction that we have decided.
Right.
Right. So, but then because we say sunrise in the east, now there are so many sub assumptions that we create because of that original assumption that sunrise in the east, which itself is not true. It's not a fact. It's an assumption based on language and, our own viewpoints. So first principle thinking is going back to the core scientific fact that this earth revolves around the sun. So if you go back to that every time, our understanding of everything else will keep improving.
Wow.
It's a little exhausting
Yeah.
to do that every time, but then it also makes us better thinkers.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. And how do you draw the difference? Maybe, I think with sunrises in the east, how is it different from your critical thinking?
So critical thinking is actually just a way of thinking. A first principle thinking is a form of critical thinking.
Correct. Okay.
Critical thinking is basically questioning the validity of whatever it is that you are saying or doing, or if whatever somebody else is saying or doing. You are looking at it critically. You are trying to see if does this information align with all the other facts and pieces of information that I have already know about the universe. And if there is a conflict, and again, it comes back to conflict, spot that conflict. Because if you leave it somewhere down the line, it will create a problem.
Okay.
So that is what critical thinking is. Always come back down to
The crux of
root
the
causes
issue, right?
and crux of the issue, and see if it matches with everything else.
Fair enough. People actually do that. Like, I mean, when
Yes.
it sounds so theoretical at this point, but the idea that people actually do that.
Yeah, people actually live like that, which is pretty incredible.
Wow. I mean, I know. I think even if we take 10% back from this conversation, I think conflict resolution is something we can probably deal with.
I mean, if you have to take one thing back, I think that would be it. And
Right.
understanding conflicts and just, in fact, you don't even have to resolve them.
Mhm.
Just being aware of it sometimes is enough, because then your brain will subconsciously work towards resolving it. The problem is that we ignore them. We are in denial.
Right.
And that's where the issue happens. So just being aware of the conflicts is, I think, half the problem solved.
Fair enough. Also, okay, now your next question. Okay, why do people
Yeah.
procrastinate?
Oh, wow. Earlier I used to be very annoyed with myself because I would procrastinate as well. And then I sort of realized that procrastination is your brain's way of telling you something. Your subconscious mind or your limbic system, the priority that your limbic system has may not be the same as the priorities that your prefrontal cortex has or your evolved brain has. So just because you say that you want to study for an exam doesn't mean that your entire brain agrees.
Okay.
So it's again conflict. If your one part of the brain is in conflict with another part, it has to tell you about the conflict, and procrastination is one way that it happens. Because for the limbic system, whatever is most important now is what will get done, not what is important for you in your future, like 10 years down the line. Who cares what happens 10 years down the line? To your limbic system, it doesn't matter. It's far more important that you watch Netflix now, because you will get dopamine now. You will feel happy now. Isn't that more important than the potential promise of happiness at a good job 10 years later? I mean, come on. Really? So to an animal, what is 10 years later job? Like, it makes no sense.
Right.
So that's why procrastination happens. It's your entire brain is not on the same page. So if you are procrastinating, A, understand why. B, understand that you haven't spent enough time convincing yourself to the core why this is important. So you have to go all the way to the core. Why is this? Why is it important that I exercise? Because I want to look good. Why is it important that I look good? Because, so and so. You keep on asking yourself why. Because I care what other people think about me. Why is it important that, it matters what other people think about me? Because I want so and so and so. So you can keep on going down. And then it comes down to the core principle that because this is who I am.
Got it.
And once it gets to that level, once it gets to the identity level, then it becomes much easier to do anything. And if it turns out that it's because my mom and dad want me to do it, then maybe, it's not as easy. So, which is why you're procrastinating.
Fair enough. Wow. Okay, so another question for you is, how can a person achieve their goals faster?
I mean, this is a very open-ended question, isn't
Right.
it? Because every word in this line is actually subjective. Goals are something that, to be honest, it'll keep changing. As soon as you are even near achieving one goal, you're already thinking about the next.
100%.
And we all know this,
Right.
which is why, even when we achieve something that we've wanted for 1 year, 2 years, 10 years, maybe you celebrate for a day and then you're already thinking, okay, what next?
What next? Yeah.
And so equating goals with feeling of success or happiness might not always be valid, because you will always want more. And faster is also such a subjective term. Who are we comparing with, really? What is the standard timeline for achieving a goal? So I don't think that's the way to look at it. And this brings us back to mental models.
Right.
How do we look at this situation? You want to achieve something. Fair enough. There is no standard timeline to achieve it. You can achieve it in 10 years. You can achieve it in 1 day. What is your idea of fast and slow? It can only be determined by your own previous accomplishments. You are the only one who knows how capable you are in achieving some things. So some achievements might be very easy for you. So then you should give yourself a shorter timeline. And some achievements might be very difficult for you. So probably, like, it's a cliche, but then I think it makes the maximum amount of sense to compete with yourself. And I live by this one mental model when it comes to this, that you do not have to be perfect. You just have to get better. I keep telling this to myself, irrespective of whatever it is, whether I'm studying or whether I'm going to the gym or whether I'm swimming. You don't have to be perfect. There's nothing like that. But if you can be even 0.01% better than the last time you did it, that's good enough. And it gives you that sense of accomplishment irrespective.
Fair point. I think it was, yeah, it is a very open-ended. And you're right about how we jump from one thing to the next. Like you've been wanting something for the longest, and then you get it, and then you're like, okay, what next? I think that's how we,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, it's ridiculous, right? Like if you buy a new iPhone, it takes you 3 hours before you feel this is exactly like the last iPhone that you had. And what was the point
I
of
know.
going through all that janjat of booking a month early and getting it? Like it's exact.
Yeah,
So yeah.
yeah. Correct, I agree. Okay, so I am extremely like extroverted. So does being an
Okay.
extrovert, according to you, make your life easy? And if yes, then how?
Uh, so we are social animals, all of us.
Right.
We look towards each other for social cues. If I'm talking about something, I'm looking at your face to know if what I'm saying makes sense or am I
Mm,
completely rambling.
right.
Am I a genius or am I a lunatic? Depends on your reaction or the
Right.
world's reaction, right? Because left in a room alone, we could be anything. We could be anyone,
Hmm.
and we would never know. So even as a baby, an infant looks to the mom to know how to show emotions, when to cry, how to cry. We learn body language from our friends, from our family. So we are always looking and exchanging information with other people. So it's great if this act of social exchange of information doesn't make you uncomfortable.
Hmm.
In a way, that's what extroversion means, right? Like you're okay being
Right.
out there talking to other people, listening to other people. That
Hmm.
doesn't give you anxiety, that doesn't make you uncomfortable.
Hmm.
At the same time, you also need time to process what's happening.
Hmm.
You need time with yourself to sort of understand all the things that you learned in the outside world. How does this relate to your inside world, right? And that's where introversion really helps.
Hmm.
So if you're an extrovert and you're saying that you need other people, and if one evening no friend calls you, you feel that everybody's left you and you're gonna die alone, and you get desperate, that is an issue. That's a problem.
Right.
So I don't really believe in introvert extrovert as a clear cut black and white
Mhm.
distinction.
Fair
I think
enough.
we are introverted with certain people, extroverted with certain people. But it's definitely good to be comfortable with other people. I think overall it gives you a social advantage.
Fair enough. And
Yeah.
okay, if now that you've said you don't believe in introverts and extroverts, but I'll just pose my next question. Maybe we can frame it in a way that is better
Uh,
suited to the audience.
okay.
But so, for example, I have the traits of an introvert, and I
Hmm.
really want to change that. I want to get out there, meet people. So I want to become closer to an extrovert that I see. What should I do?
Yeah.
Like, how do I go about doing that? Because again, hanging out with people is going to be a nightmare for me. So how do I deal with that?
uh, so when we have to understand why are we behaving in a particular way, because very like a wide variety of things could trigger anxiety.
Mm,
So and everybody has a limit of both introversion and extroversion. There is a limit to how long I can stay in my own room. There's a limit to how long I can spend with my friends.
mm,
So, and there's a limit to how much of social input can I take, how much of impulses can I take from the outside world before I say, okay, I'm out, I need a break.
mm,
So there is a limit to everyone. In general, it's a good rule of thumb to go on expanding your comfort zone. So as a kid, you may be okay with spending time with your friends for 2 hours. After which you feel okay, I need to be alone. Some people are okay spending the entire weekend with other people. Whatever it is, it's a good idea to keep on expanding your comfort zone and not be too caught up in trying to define who you are. Whoever you are, you know your comfort zone limits. don't let those comfort zone limits define you, which is a problem that many people have. They take pride in the fact that this is my limit, without realizing that that's a very arbitrary thing. Your limit has been there because your brain has decided that itna tak I can cope with, beyond this I can't. It's not something to be proud of or ashamed of. It's just a line. It's like somebody going to the gym and saying, I'm somebody who can lift 50 kg. Okay, but what about 55 kg? Like, no, I am not somebody who can lift 50 kg. That doesn't make any sense. If you keep lifting 50 kg, you will be able to lift 55 eventually. Right? And then, so it's not your definition. So don't let your limits define you, I think. And we do that all the time, which we should stop.
Right. Yeah, like even I think when people come back, they'll be like, my social quota for the day is drained. But what is your social quota for the day?
Exactly. It's such an arbitrary thing.
I know. So how has like out of curiosity, like so how has work from home, work from office? Like I'm so glad coming back to office, but I know people who are dreading coming back to office because I, again, as you said, right, take from social cues, see how people react, and I think that helps me work faster and better. Whereas for certain other people, it's worked in the complete opposite sense. So for them to sort of get back into this normal now, how can they deal with
Yeah.
this? Yeah.
So, I mean, I feel that our brains can adjust to anything. So
Right.
people adjusted to work from home incredibly.
I know.
On an average, the companies were so scared that this won't work. Like everything will crash, but nothing did. People managed. In fact, companies did very well. They
Correct.
saved up on a lot of money
Right.
for offices, and people were working. And one of the reasons people want to go back to work is because that distinction between work and home was so important.
I know.
As long as they were at home, companies were calling them at 10 p.m. also, because tu ghar pe hi hai na, kaam kar le thoda aur. So that distinction is very important. Which is why I think work from work is good, because we find it difficult to draw a line where work ends and home begins. And the other reason is that all good ideas come from conversation, whether it's conversation with yourself or conversation with other people. And no matter how many Zoom calls you have in a day, sharing the same geographical location with other people where you can read body language and all of that helps in better ideas, because the great ideas come after the meeting. When the meeting is over and you're meeting for coffee and you just go out for a cup of chai, and there you are talking, and then some idea clicks in your head, which we lose out in work from home. So for that reason, I think it's great to work together.
Fair point. Okay, so I think taking one anecdote, when I was young, I used to have these Shaman Davar classes, and there was this one dance performance where I think one girl got stage fear in the middle of it, and all of us just stopped dancing. Like I knew the steps, the person next to me knew the steps, but I think we all just froze. So what causes this, stage fear in people? Because they might be the most confident people with me, but the minute they put up on stage, they have this fear.
Yeah.
So how do people why do they get it, and how can they overcome something like that?
Yeah, the neuroscience of stage fear is such an interesting topic. When we talk of movement, whether it is speech or body movement, there is a sense of flow. Like we know what move comes after what. When I'm talking to you and I'm moving my hands, it's not like I have to constantly think about how my hands should go.
Right.
Whereas if I start thinking about it, then I might start feeling conscious. Like, wait, why is my hand here? I
Right.
didn't put it here.
Correct.
Right? This seems so awkward now.
Yeah.
But in flow, it's okay.
Yeah.
It's very important to maintain that flow. That flow goes away when we are very conscious about ourselves. And because we are social animals, we are conscious of ourselves when we are conscious that other people are conscious of us. So when we see 100 people looking at you, you start looking at you and trying to guess what they must be seeing. And so it's like an out-of-body experience.
Right. Yeah.
Where you are standing on stage, but you're also looking at yourself standing on stage.
Right.
And that's a lot to process for the brain. And while you're trying to process all this, you completely forget that you have to sing or dance or give a speech or whatever.
Right.
So that's the freeze response. There are also other explanations as to why having so many people judging you triggers your threat response. So it's like a threat that if so many people are against you, then they could all come and kill you. So then part of the fear response is the freeze, flight, and fright response.
Right.
So freeze is the step one. Like you just freeze. It's like deer in the headlight. You just freeze. Don't move.
Correct.
And that happens on stage. And if it becomes too much, then you might just run away from the stage. So that's the flight response. So these are all old biological things that kick in on stage.
So how do I deal with it? Like, how does someone deal with, I've gone there now what?
The best, I mean, we could talk about it theoretically all day, but the reality is that the only way to get rid of it is to make your limbic brain comfortable. Your prefrontal cortex or your evolved brain already knows that these people are not going to kill you. But the only way that the limbic brain will become comfortable is if it gets exposed to it again and again and understands that, oh, these people are not a threat. And suppose by good luck, you have one or two good experiences on stage. The whole thing will flip around, because far from being a threat, I am getting so much validation, so much dopamine,
Right.
that I would have never got otherwise. So then you start looking forward to it. Then it becomes a drug. You want to go on stage, you want to perform because you want to feel all that love and validation. It's like 100 times more than what one person could have given you.
Fair
So then the whole thing flips around and you want to get to that stage.
That makes sense. Yeah. All right. Did you see any patterns in the influencers that you've interacted with, like Tanmay Bhatt, Suhani, Ranveer? Like, what makes them successful at whatever they do? Did you see a pattern?
So they're all very different people, but one thing that's common is that I think they're very adaptable in the sense that they can see where things are going. And they're also very honest with themselves. So if they do something and it works, they know how to build on it. And if they do something and it doesn't work, they know how to change. They know how to switch from one thing to another. They don't get caught up in this, I am a failure, I should just stop and go away. That mentality isn't there. They know that for growth, you have to keep on reiterating and creating new versions of yourself and keep growing. So whatever it is, and the three of them are doing such different things, but that core principle of trying, learning, trying again, getting better, and then putting out something that is just flawless, that is something that I think everyone should learn from.
Fair point. So I think right now, again, success is defined differently for different people, but to become successful, what are some habits that we can inculcate from, say, our college days or from our early years in our life that could probably help us reach, whatever success means to us?
Right. This is a continuation of the last question that you
Right,
asked.
yes.
I think we should do exactly what these guys have done, which is that whatever it is that you're doing, irrespective whether you're trying to play the guitar or whether you're trying to become a rocket scientist or becoming a dancer, irrespective, you should have insight into what you did, enough humility to take feedback, understand, did it work, did it not work, what worked and what didn't. Everybody wants to be told that you were great, you were amazing, you're the best dancer in the world. But that's not enough. That's not what you're looking for. You're not looking for short-term gratification. If you are in it for the long game, you should look for critical feedback. And if you're lucky, you will have friends who will give you critical feedback.
Right.
If not, hire somebody, hire a trainer, hire a coach, hire somebody who can give you honest, critical feedback, who knows what they're talking about. And that is the most valuable thing. So people think that mentorship should be free and people should just give them free advice. But then sometimes that's not true, because good, honest advice is the most valuable thing in the world if you are humble enough to take it and learn from it. And if there's nobody else, then you have to do it by yourself. So document whatever it is you have done, write down what you think should be better, and work towards that. I think that's the single most important thing that any college student can do.
Fair point. I mean, learn to take constructive criticism, I would say.
Yes,
They-
absolutely. Easier said than
Yeah,
done, but
correct.
it's
I
a
mean,
skill.
it's
It's
a
a
skill,
skill.
100%. Okay.
Yeah.
Again, following up to I think when we talked about drugs, alcohol, we talked about how it is very, like, we form bad habits very quickly. Like, we just pick it up and it's that, instant gratification that we get that, okay, you know what, my body's loving it, I'm doing great. Then why is it so difficult for me to now build on good habits? Like, why can't how do I trick my brain into believing that, this is a good habit? How do I, somehow inculcate that into my life as easy as I do a bad?
So I think we have to be kinder to ourselves. We have a lot of good habits. The problem is that we don't notice them,
Right.
right? So you can't be alive and reasonably successful and learning all of these things if you didn't have good habits. So let's be fair. Let's pat ourselves on the back for whatever good that we have done. And the reason that bad habits are easy to get is because bad habits are good things taken too far. Like we talked about in the earlier in the conversation, all bad habits are reasonable solutions that your brain has come across to problems that existed a million years ago.
Right.
So we need to be aware that it's not your brain's fault. It just hasn't gotten used to the modern world yet. And it's up to you. Like, your limbic system can't read, by the way.
No.
So your limbic system doesn't understand textbooks, doesn't understand podcasts. Only your prefrontal cortex understands all this. So you need to tell your limbic system that, listen, the world has changed. Don't eat that cake, bro. You just had breakfast. You don't need this carbohydrate intake. You don't need it.
Right.
Right? So it's up to you. That the reason that bad habits are so easy is because your limbic system is really keen on making you survive, like keeping you alive. And it doesn't have access to all the information that you have. So that's when your communication with your own limbic system breaks down, that's when bad habits form.
Fair enough.
So yeah, keep talking.
So how do I deal with it? Like, for example, yeah, as you said, I don't need that cake, but I'm feeling very sad and upset about it. Now I've tricked my limbic system also. Like, I know it's bad, but it's there. The cake is there. I am sad. So this thing is, I am sad, hence I need the cake. But how do I deal with that?
And the problem is, the cake is always there.
The cake is always there in some form
There is
or the
always
other.
a cake.
Right.
So have the cake. It's okay. Have the cake. But remind yourself that there is always going to be a cake.
Right.
So even if you don't have it, the essential fear, the limbic fear, is that I will lose out on the cake. Tomorrow when I come back, some other tribe will come and take the cake away, and then I will wish I had the cake.
Right.
But you and I both know that's not happening. There is a cake tomorrow, there's a cake day after tomorrow, there's a cake for the rest of your life.
Right.
So even if you don't eat it for a month, you can still have it. So the first thing to do, I feel, is to really introspect and get rid of that sense of panic. Don't panic. Just don't panic. Everything will wait. Everything will remain. Don't panic. Most of our bad decisions happen because we are panicking. We're afraid that we will lose out, we will miss out, they will go away, they will leave me. Something,
Right.
some form of panic is making you take all those decisions. Don't panic. And then just wait and look around, and you'll find that things are settling down by themselves.
Fair enough. I think we make ourselves the center of the universe. I think at these points where we're like, oh no,
Yep.
if I don't take this decision, it's the end of the world.
Yeah, it's not really.
Yeah. All right. So most people say that you are an average of the 5 social media accounts you follow. What's your take on that?
Not really, is it? I mean, we follow so many
Yeah.
social media platforms. I could say that you are very if you jot down all the influences in your life, say you are exposed to 100 influences, probably the first 5 would have had a disproportionately large impact on you. So it's not just about social media. If you look at all the influences, maybe the book that affected you the most, that teacher who affected you the most, your mom or your dad, that one friend that you speak about all the time about your philosophies, these 4 or 5 books or people or podcasts or movies would have had a disproportionately large impact, maybe like 70% to 30% or 90 to 10. And definitely I think we should be aware of it, because none of us are original. We are a mix of all the influences that we have come across. So if you know that these 5 have been the most impactful, and say you want to change yourself, try to change one of them. Try to make somebody else enter into that top 5 and get influenced by that person consciously, voluntarily. And you'll find your life drifting towards in that direction. Right? So I think that's a great way of doing it. Just change your influences to change who you are.
Fair point. Follow up to what we discussed. Now, I think, again, like just like how we watch content mindlessly, we also follow a lot of accounts. So, what is something that we should be like? Should we be cautious, first of all, before following any social media account? If yes, then how? Like, what exactly should we look at?
So I'm not very sure we should be very careful while following, but I am a believer in refreshing. So like if you find somebody that you think is interesting, even if that interest sparks in your head, follow. Go through their account, just follow. But I think we should be aware of clutter. So follow them, spend a month, spend few weeks, see how their content is influencing you, how are they making you think, and if they are contributing to your happiness or your thoughts or your intelligence or your personal growth in some way. And see if you want that energy in your life, see if you want those kind of inputs in your life, and unfollow if it doesn't work. I think that's absolutely fair. Social media is it's literally like an open market where everybody has the right to follow and unfollow whoever it is that they feel should add to their lives. Early on, as a content creator, I was not very clear about this. I thought that unfollowing is such a bad thing to do.
Right.
But now I have completely changed my mind. I feel that if I have 50 people following me, I hope that I'm adding to all 50 people's lives. Because that's what you're here for, right? It's not just for the numbers. You want to impact and you want to be impacted. You want their life experiences to help you.
Right.
So you don't want to be a number either. So I think it's completely fair. Just have regular decluttering sessions in your life.
Fair point. Fair point. Okay, so I think we all talk about hustle culture. So, in your opinion, what is hustle culture, and is it really beneficial for our mind, body, etc.?
Hustle culture, I feel, is a new word to describe an old phenomenon, which is working really hard
Yeah.
at something that is important to you.
Right.
I think you can spin any amount of stories around it, but I don't think human beings could have reached where we are without incredible people getting incredible ideas and working really, really hard to make that happen. And you can call it hustle culture, you can call it hard work, whatever, but this fundamental fact cannot be changed. Somebody has to work hard for everybody else to get access to something. Can't change that, right?
Fair
Like
enough.
our grandparents have worked incredibly hard so that our parents could work incredibly hard and achieve more, so that we could work hard and achieve even more. So this hard work also accumulates and gets carried forward. The benefits of hard work gets carried forward across generations, right? This is apart from everything else, especially apart from mental health. Now hustle culture versus hard work का फर्क है कि hustle culture में mental health का conversation भी आ जाता है, which I think is very important.
Right.
You should work hard. Should you work hard at the cost of your mental health? Absolutely not. You should take care of your mental health. Are you saying you can't work hard without having your mental health affected? Absolutely not. It is a very subjective thing. What is hard work to you might be easy work for me. So if I'm working 10 hours a day and my mental health is good, nobody else has the right to come and tell me that no, your mental health is actually not.
Right.
Right? So it's a very subjective thing. I believe that everybody should work as hard as they can, as hard as they want to achieve something that they want to do in life. Nobody else gets to say how much somebody should work. The only thing that we can say is we can remove the taboo against asking for help for mental health problems. So if somebody's feeling stressed, make them aware that there is help available.
Right.
But don't tell them to work hard or harder or lesser or whatever. That's your perspective.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
All right. So now the next question might be a trigger for some, but we've seen a drastic increase in students committing suicide, and getting into depression or some sort of mental health issue. And as you said, there is still a taboo around it. So what is the cause of it? Again, pandemic was one reason I think that people said, you were on your own, but I think there is more to it, which we want to understand from you. And how can a person sort of get through it?
So these different topics are all connected. The rise in anxiety, depression, why mental health issues are rising, and suicide. All of this gets connected with your brain trying to get control of yourself and the environment. So if you feel like you are in control of yourself, of your emotions, of the consequences of your actions, then you build on it. But whenever you lose control or you feel like you're losing control, that is what triggers anxiety. And it's a spiral. So all mental health problems, they don't happen suddenly. They don't happen overnight.
Right.
With some exceptions. So there is something called acute depression or traumatic depression. So there's one incident, one traumatic event that can completely overwhelm your brain's defense mechanisms.
Right.
So we all have defense mechanisms which prevent us from spiraling downwards. But if those are overwhelmed for whatever reason, you can lose control of everything and it can spiral down. But for most people, it doesn't happen like that. It happens because a series of small things has chipped away at our defenses. And then there is one trigger, one thing that happens that is like the final straw, so to speak. Right? So we need to have these kind of conversations around mental health. As important as this is, we should also have conversations around mental reserve. How do we strengthen mental reserve? Because life is tough. There are going to be challenges, and different people will face those challenges differently depending on what mental reserve they have. And that mental reserve depends on what family background they've come up in, what kind of social support they have, what experiences they've had in life. It is so subjective. Nobody else can tell anybody else that your reaction to this trauma was wrong. You shouldn't have reacted like this. Nobody can do that. It's their individual life journey. What we can do is to tell them that what you're feeling is A, valid, and B, help is available, and C, this is not the end. You can get better. So the whole conversation on mental health is about hope, that you can get better so that the next time something like this happens, you will react to it differently. So we have to work towards increasing mental reserve of our generation. And that conversation has to go towards that.
Fair enough. Another question, I think, off the, again, top of my head, and this is the last question for you, but there have been times, I think, a lot of us where our friends come to us and they talk to us that, they're going through something, or maybe they're going through therapy, mental, they have a particular issue that has happen in their life, and we don't know how to deal with it because again it's something that is not usual, right? Like, okay, I talk about I'm getting a fever or something, and the other person's like, okay, take care, you know what, have hot water. But now here, how do I, as a person who's, I know I'm aware, I have exposure to it, but I don't want to say the wrong things. So how do I sort of have this conversation with them?
There are certain ground rules when it comes to this, because we cannot generalize any particular situation. Everybody's story would be different, everybody's
Exactly.
trauma would be different.
Right.
So, what are the ground rules? If it is somebody that you care about, what are you trying to tell them? You are trying to tell them that you are there,
Right.
right? That they can reach out to you right now, later on also. It's important to understand that all these things are happening at a limbic level. So sometimes words don't work. Like I said, limbic doesn't understand words
Right.
like your prefrontal does.
Correct.
Your limbic understands gestures because it understands what you see, what you sense, body language and even words, but then it might not understand all the nuances of the words that your prefrontal cortex can.
Right.
So it will understand basic words. So you have to tell that other person's limbic system that A, you are there, B, help is available, and you are willing to help them find help. I would not recommend anybody take up the responsibility of making somebody else better
Right.
if you're not qualified to do it, right?
Fair
So
enough.
it's like if your friend calls up, or if you're traveling with a friend and their car breaks down, what are you going to do? You are comforting them that I'm sorry your car has broken down. You're telling them that, listen, I'm not leaving you. I'm not going to catch an Uber and go away
Right.
and leaving you here. I'm going to stay with you and see, I don't know how to fix a car,
Right.
but I will stay here while you call up for help, or I will call for
Well,
help for you.
Yeah.
That's it. Let's not complicate it. Let's not try and fix anyone.
Right.
Just be there, get professional help, and make sure they're taking it.
Fair point.
That's it.
Right. Understood. All right. I think this was a great conversation, but we do have a rapid fire round for you
Okay.
where you
All right.
must answer the questions in either one line or a word. So your first question is, are self-help books beneficial? Yes or no?
Only when you need them.
Okay, fair enough. What do you mean by toxic positivity?
I think the intent. So when you are trying to help somebody, you want them to get better. If your intent is that you want them to get better, if you want all of them to get better, like if you want them to get better as a person, then you will help them in the right way. But if you want them to just appear better, whatever is their mental state, whatever is their state of mental health, that could be toxic positivity. So it's just like lifting weights at the cost of your back.
Got it.
Just lift harder, go, like lift 5 more. I don't care if you're in pain, lift harder. Like, I know that lifting weight is good for me, but if it is hurting my back, it's going to give me long-term problems. So a good gym instructor wouldn't do that. So just like that, if somebody's spreading a positive message, toxic positivity would be that go for a run every day, wake up at 6 a.m. no matter what your mental state is. Don't talk about your problems, think positively. I know these are good, but then you also have to look at your mental health together with it. So it's not holistic. That's toxic.
Fair enough. Best way to know like more about yourself. How do you discover yourself?
Wow. Documentation.
Fair
The
enough.
only way. Yeah, document everything, write a journal, write a diary, whatever, but document.
Your favorite book?
Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
Okay. Your favorite philosopher?
Wow. So this kept changing as I grew up. Currently, I'm in a J. Krishnamurti and Alan Watts phase.
Mhm.
And they're both talking about very similar things, but Alan Watts talks about it from a more westernized concept, and J. Krishnamurti has a very Indian spiritual way of talking about it. But yeah, currently these two.
Thank you so much for listening to this entire conversation. I hope you learned something new today. And the major takeaway is to try and understand your behavioral patterns, habits, and act accordingly. Don't fall for new trends like hustle culture, toxic positivity, and harm yourself unnecessarily. Take the right call, develop good habits, acknowledge those habits, and then change the direction of your life. So, yeah, that's all for today. I hope you have learned something new. Until then, see you again.